We can also see examples of skew in some of the histograms that I showed you a little while ago using the class data and also the Christmas songs data. So you might have noticed the question asking about how likely you think it is you'll get an A in the class is left skewed. We have a longer tail pointing out towards the left on the graph. The Christmas songs data is relatively symmetrical. Most of our Christmas songs are concentrated in the middle of the graph with roughly the same number of songs on either side of those big bars. Finally, the question asking about the total number of drinks you've had in one night is right skewed because most of our data is clumped on the left side of the graph and we have a longer tail going out towards the right. You can also see an example of a bimodal histogram. So for example, on a test where one group studied and one group didn't study, you might expect to see a clump of scores that are low and a clump of scores that are high. So it would be bimodal because there are two different clumps on the graph. And finally, last but not least, we have one more type of graph that we're going to talk about, which is a line graph. Line graphs are only good for interval or ratio level variables, so that means variables that are numerical in terms of the values that they can take on. And what line graphs show you are the value of your variable over time. Your x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, will generally show some measure of time, whether that's days, weeks, months, years, or so on. And your y-axis will show you the variable value. So the value that your variable takes on at some time. And examples include this funny one, which is harpoons in space by year. So you see on the x-axis we have year, which is time progressing, and on the y-axis we have a variable value or count, which is number of harpoons in space. This graph, which is potatoes consumed per day of the week. I don't know what the context is, but hey, potatoes. So we have days as your time on the x-axis and kilograms of potatoes as your count or variable value on the y-axis. So finally, another place where you see line graphs a lot are in data from polls and so on. So for example, this graph shows you year on the x-axis, so that's your time variable, and then the percentage of people who support legalizing marijuana on the y-axis, so that would be the value of your variable. And as you can see, it's edged up pretty consistently since about 1970. All right, and that concludes the lecture for this week. Just as a couple of reminders, problem set number 2 is going to be due this Sunday, September 20th at 11:59 p.m. The optional review session will be from 11 to 12 on Wednesday. Nobody showed up last week, which is fine. That tells me you guys are doing all right with the material. But if you want to show up this week, please do. And otherwise, feel free to email me with questions, or if you can't make that first review, email me for an alternate review time. Otherwise, have a great week.